This story is titled, My Dad Planned a Dream Trip for My Graduation, but my stepmom and stepsister burned my passport. Here's how he finally took a stand against them. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey everyone. So I just graduated from high school last week, and I'm still trying to process everything that's happened since then. Honestly, I wasn't expecting anything big for my graduation. My dad isn't the grand gesture type, and I've always been okay with that. But he really caught me off guard this time, in the best way possible. To give you some context, my mom passed away when I was 6. It was sudden, and honestly, it left this huge void in my life. She was the kind of person who made everything feel magical, even the smallest things. One of her biggest dreams was to visit Greece. She was obsessed with Greek mythology and history. I'm talking about stacks of books, hours spent watching documentaries, and even a notebook full of places she wanted to see. She'd always say, "One day, we'll walk those streets together, and I'll show you everything I've been dreaming about." After she passed, my dad did his best to keep her memory alive. He didn't have a lot of time. He was working long hours to keep us afloat, but he'd still find little ways to share her love for Greece with me. We'd watch travel shows about the islands, or flip through her old books. I still have this one book she loved, with pages covered in her handwriting, little notes she'd jot down about places like Santorini and Athens. It's one of the few things I have that still feels like it connects me to her. Growing up, Greece was always the dream. But as I got older, I started to think it might stay just that, a dream. Life kept getting in the way. We didn't have the money for a big trip like that, and as much as I wanted to go, I didn't want to bring it up and put more pressure on my dad. So, I kind of let it go and figured maybe someday I'd make it happen on my own. That's why what happened at my graduation dinner totally floored me. My dad pulled off the biggest surprise of my life. The dinner itself was already amazing. We had it at this little Italian restaurant that I love, with just close friends and family. It was simple, nothing over the top, but perfect for me. My stepmom, Linda, and my stepsister Brooke were there too, along with some of my best friends. Everyone seemed in a good mood, and I was just soaking it all in. I didn't suspect a thing. Toward the end of the dinner, after everyone had eaten way too much pasta and dessert, my dad stood up to give a little speech. Now, my dad isn't exactly the most eloquent guy. He's more of a keep it short and sweet kind of person. So when he started talking, I thought he was just going to say something generic like, "Congrats, kid, I'm proud of you." But then he started talking about Mom. He talked about how proud she'd be of me, and how he wished she could have been there to see this milestone. He mentioned how she always dreamed of going to Greece, and how much she wanted us to experience it as a family. Then he said, "So, in her honor, I think it's time we finally make that dream come true. Pack your bags, kid. We're going to Greece." At first, I didn't even process what he was saying. I just stared at him like, "Wait, what?" He smiled and handed me this little envelope. Inside was an itinerary for a 10-day trip to Greece. Santorini, Athens, the Acropolis, all the places Mom used to talk about. I couldn't believe it. I started tearing up right there at the table, which is not something I normally do, but I couldn't help it. It wasn't just a trip. It was everything my mom had wanted for us, finally coming to life. The best part? It was going to be just me and Dad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to exclude anyone, but this trip felt personal. It was something that connected us to Mom, and I felt like it needed to be just the two of us. Plus, it wasn't like Linda or Brooke were being left out unfairly. Linda had this big project at work, and Brooke had signed up for summer classes to get ahead for college. It all worked out perfectly, or at least that's what I thought at the time. The rest of the night was a blur of excitement. My friends were all hyped for me, asking a million questions about the trip and joking about how they were going to stow away in my suitcase. Even Linda and Brooke seemed happy enough. They congratulated me, and Linda said something like, "That's such an amazing gift," while Brooke nodded along. It all felt normal, but looking back, it was just another performance for Dad. Earlier that day, I'd asked Brooke to help me set up some chairs for the dinner. She rolled her eyes and said, "Why don't you do it yourself? Isn't this your party?" But the second Dad walked into the room, she was all smiles, asking if I needed anything else. It's always like that with them. If I forgot to do something, I'd hear about it for days. But if Brooke didn't lift a finger, it was suddenly no big deal. Dad never seemed to notice the difference. After dinner, when we got home, I started Googling everything I could about Greece. I stayed up way too late looking at pictures of the blue-domed buildings in Santorini, the Parthenon in Athens, and even random little villages I'd never heard of. I made a list of places I wanted to visit and things I wanted to try. I couldn't wait. Dad and I spent the next couple of days talking about the trip nonstop. We started planning out what to pack and what we wanted to do when we got there. He told me he'd already booked everything. Flights, hotels, even a tour of the Acropolis. I could tell he was just as excited as I was, which made it even better. This wasn't just a vacation. It felt like something bigger, something we both needed. For a while, everything seemed perfect. Linda and Brooke were going about their business, and I didn't think much of it. They'd never been super involved in my life, but we kept things civil for Dad's sake. Looking back now, I realized there were small signs that something was off, but at the time, I was so focused on the trip that I didn't pay attention. I started packing early because I didn't want to forget anything. I was that level of excited. I even dug out one of Mom's old scarves to bring with me. It had a blue and white pattern that reminded me of Greece. At that point, I thought everything was set. However, a couple of days after the dinner, I noticed Linda and Brooke acting off. Not full-on hostile or anything, but definitely not their usual distant selves. They were quieter than normal, and every now and then, I'd catch them whispering to each other. I figured they were just in their own little bubble and didn't think much of it. Brooke had her summer school stuff, and Linda was always busy with work. I told myself it was nothing. But then, things started feeling strange in a way I couldn't ignore. For starters, Linda wasn't even trying to pretend anymore. She'd throw insults my way like it was nothing. One morning, when I was going through my packing list, she walked by and said, "Don't forget to pack your attitude. You'll need it in Greece." I looked up at her, shocked, but she just kept going. "Do you even know how to act in another country? Or are you going to embarrass the rest of us too?" Brooke was even worse. She straight up called me Daddy's little brat to my face when Dad wasn't around. She'd say stuff like, "Greece? You? What a waste of money. You don't even deserve it. If I were Dad, I'd spend that money on someone who actually contributes to this family." She didn't even try to sugarcoat it. "You're just a spoiled leech. Enjoy the free ride while it lasts." What made it even more unbearable was how fake they were in front of my dad. The second he walked into the room, Linda turned into this perfect Stepford wife. She'd say, "Oh, sweetie, did you figure out your outfits yet? I can help if you need." Or, "Greece is such a wonderful choice for a graduation gift, Richard. You're such a thoughtful dad." Brooke would suddenly pipe up with, "I'm so jealous, I wish I could go too. Make sure to bring me back a souvenir." It was nauseating. The breaking point came one night when I was in my room, and I overheard them trash-talking me in the kitchen. They didn't even bother lowering their voices. Brooke said, "That spoiled bitch thinks she's so special because she's going to Greece. She doesn't do anything to earn it. Just sits there acting like the world revolves around her." Linda chimed in, "I've had enough of her attitude. Acting like she's the queen of this house. Honestly, I can't stand the sight of her. She thinks she's better than us because Richard babies her." Brooke laughed and said, "If she disappeared tomorrow, I'd throw a party. She's nothing but a parasite. She doesn't deserve this trip. Or anything, really." I stood there in the hallway, stunned. They weren't just being petty. They outright hated me, and they didn't care if I heard it or not. Part of me wanted to storm in there and scream at them, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. They'd just gaslight me, or worse, play victim when Dad came home. I honestly didn't know whether I was being really selfish for not inviting them to the trip, and they had a reason to feel this way. But still, that didn't justify being that rude to me. I decided I needed to protect myself. If things kept going this way, I had a feeling it wouldn't end well. That's when I got the idea to start recording their conversations. It wasn't something I took lightly, but I felt like I had no other choice. I didn't trust them, and I needed proof in case things got worse. So I downloaded a voice recorder app on my phone and started keeping it with me whenever they were around. I didn't have a clear plan for what I'd do with the recordings, but it felt like the safest move. It didn't take long for them to slip up. One night, Dad had to work late, so it was just the three of us at home. I stayed in my room most of the evening, but around 9 p.m., I came downstairs to grab a snack. Linda and Brooke were in the kitchen, and the second they saw me, they stopped talking. It was so obvious. I pretended not to notice, grabbed some chips, and went back upstairs. As soon as I was out of sight, they started talking again. I turned on the recorder and quietly made my way back down the stairs, stopping just before the kitchen. I couldn't see them, but I could hear every word. Linda was saying, "She's such a pity, thinking she's so special because she's going to Greece. I don't see what's so great about it." Brooke laughed and said, "Yeah, and she doesn't even realize how easy it would be to ruin it for her. She'd never see it coming." I felt my stomach drop. Ruin it? What were they even talking about? I wanted to storm into the kitchen and demand answers, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had what I needed on the recording. Better to let them keep talking and show their true colors. I couldn't listen anymore. I sat in my room later that night, listening to the recording over and over. Their voices, their words, they felt like knives, cutting away at every piece of me that had been holding on to hope that things could change. I realized something in that moment. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried to get along with them, they were never going to see me as family. I could clean, I could smile, I could bite my tongue every time they said something cruel. It didn't matter. It was never going to be enough for them. That realization hit me hard, but it also gave me a strange kind of clarity. Why was I trying so hard to make peace with people who clearly didn't care about me? Why was I shrinking myself, apologizing, and bending over backward just to avoid their wrath? Sitting there in the dark with their hateful words echoing in my ears, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them push me around anymore. I wasn't going to keep quiet for the sake of keeping the peace. They'd taken enough from me. The next morning, I showed the recording to Dad. He listened to the whole thing without saying much, just shaking his head a little. When it was over, he sighed and said, "I'll talk to them." And I asked him what he was going to say, and he just said, "Don't worry about it. I'll handle it." But here's the thing, nothing changed. If anything, Linda and Brooke got worse. They stopped talking to me altogether unless Dad was around. And even then, it was forced. I felt like I was living with strangers. Dad, on the other hand, acted like everything was fine. He said they were just having a hard time, and that they'd come around eventually. I didn't buy it. The recording had made it clear they weren't just being difficult, they were actively trying to mess things up for me. I didn't know how far they'd go, but I had a sinking feeling I was about to find out. 2 days before we were set to leave, I decided to start gathering all my documents. Passport, tickets, itinerary, everything. I'd kept my passport in a small zippered pocket in my carry-on bag for safekeeping. I knew exactly where I'd put it, so I wasn't worried. I opened the pocket to double-check, and my heart stopped. It wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I'd put it somewhere else without realizing it. I mentally retraced my steps, trying to remember if I'd taken it out for some reason. I couldn't recall ever moving it, but I didn't want to panic yet. I went through my entire bag, every pocket and compartment, hoping it had just slipped into some hidden corner. It wasn't there. I emptied the bag onto my bed and searched through all the clothes and items I'd already packed, one by one, shaking out anything that could have possibly hidden the passport. Still nothing. That's when the panic started to set in. I tore through my room next, checking every drawer, every shelf, even the tiniest crevices between furniture. I looked under my bed, behind the nightstand, inside books, anywhere it could have fallen or been misplaced. Nothing. I started muttering to myself, "This doesn't make sense," over and over, as if repeating it would magically make my passport reappear. I moved on to the living room, thinking maybe I'd left it on the coffee table or counter while sorting things. I pulled apart the couch cushions, checked under the rug, and even opened random drawers in the entertainment center, just in case. Again, nothing. The more I searched, the more frantic I became. This wasn't like me. I was meticulous about keeping important things where they belonged. There was no way I'd just misplaced my passport. Linda and Brooke were in the kitchen when I finally gave up scouring the living room. My nerves were shot. My hands were shaking as I walked in. I tried to stay calm as I asked, "Have either of you seen my passport? I can't find it anywhere." Linda didn't even bother looking up from her coffee. "Why would I know where your passport is? You're the one who's going on this grand vacation, not me." Brooke snorted from across the room. "Maybe it grew legs and ran off. Even your passport knows you don't deserve that trip." I stared at them, my frustration boiling over. "Can you be serious for once? This isn't a joke. I need it for the trip." Linda finally glanced at me, raising an eyebrow with that smug expression she'd mastered. "Well, if you were responsible, you wouldn't have lost it in the first place. Maybe you should try looking harder." That comment set me on edge. It wasn't just dismissive, it was condescending, like she already knew I wasn't going to find it. I glared at her for a moment, then stormed back upstairs. I went through my room again, this time more aggressively, pulling open drawers and tossing things aside. Still nothing. It was like the walls were closing in on me. After another 30 minutes of fruitless searching, I decided to try one last-ditch effort. I opened my closet and started pulling everything out. Clothes, shoes, old boxes, even things I hadn't touched in years. I told myself I wouldn't stop until I found it. That's when I heard Brooke's voice from the hallway. "Still looking for that passport?" I turned to find both her and Linda standing in the doorway, smirking. The look on their faces made my stomach drop. Something about their expressions told me this wasn't just them being rude. They knew something. I didn't respond. I just kept digging through the pile of clothes I'd pulled from my closet. Linda crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. You know, maybe if you spent less time acting like a spoiled brat and more time being responsible, you wouldn't be in this mess. I was about to tell them off when Brooke reached into her pocket and pulled something out. Oh, you mean this? She said, holding up what looked like a charred corner of paper. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. My passport, or at least what was left of it. The edges were burnt, and the rest was so damaged it was barely recognizable. My heart sank as she tossed it onto my bed like it was trash. There you go, Brooke said with a grin. Guess it had a little accident. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You burned my passport? Are you insane? Linda shrugged, completely unfazed. Don't look at me. I didn't do it. Maybe you shouldn't leave important documents lying around. Brooke chimed in. Yeah, you must have left it somewhere it could catch fire. Not our problem if you're careless. I was shaking with anger. You're lying. I didn't leave it lying around. You did this on purpose. Brooke rolled her eyes, tossing her hands in the air. Believe what you want, princess. Either way, you're not going to Greece now. I didn't even know how to respond. My mind was racing, and all I could feel was a mix of anger, frustration, and complete despair. I grabbed what was left of my passport and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind me. Back in my room, I sat on the bed, staring at the ruined document in my hands. There was no fixing this. It was completely destroyed. The trip I'd been looking forward to for months, the chance to honor my mom's memory, was gone. I wanted to cry, but I refused to give them the satisfaction. All the excitement I'd felt about the trip was gone, replaced by a sinking realization that they'd succeeded in ruining everything. But I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I grabbed my phone and took pictures of the destroyed passport. Then I texted my dad, telling him to come home immediately. I didn't go into details. I didn't trust myself to explain it without completely losing it. I just sent the pictures and wrote, "We need to talk. Now." It didn't take long for Dad to respond. He texted back that he'd be home as soon as possible. I sat on my bed, clutching what was left of my passport. I didn't even want to see Linda or Brooke, so I stayed in my room, pacing and waiting for Dad to walk through the door. I heard the sound of his car pulling into the driveway about 20 minutes later. He must have been speeding to get home that quickly. The front door opened, and immediately I heard his voice calling out, "What's going on?" He sounded panicked, probably because my message had been so abrupt. I didn't answer. I just waited. Linda was the first to respond, putting on her fakest concerned tone. "Oh, Richard, it's nothing. She's overreacting like always. She probably misplaced something and—" "Don't even try it!" I yelled from my room as I came storming down the stairs, holding the burnt remains of my passport. "They burned it, Dad! They destroyed my passport!" Dad's eyes darted from me to the charred document in my hands, then to Linda and Brooke, who were standing in the kitchen, looking completely unfazed. For a second, I thought maybe he wasn't going to believe me. Then he said, "What the hell is this?" In the angriest tone I'd ever heard from him. Linda immediately went on the defensive. "Oh, come on, Richard. You know how careless she is. She lit a cigarette and forgot it besides her passport, and it got damaged. You know teenagers don't take care of their things." I couldn't believe it. "I don't even smoke." Brooke chimed in. "Yeah, she's just trying to blame us because she's too irresponsible to admit she messed up." I couldn't hold back anymore. "They're lying." My voice was shaking, but I didn't stop. "Dad, I've kept quiet for so long because I thought it would make things easier. I thought if I just put up with it, if I just stayed out of their way, they'd eventually come around. But they haven't. They're not going to. They don't care about me. They never have. And I'm done pretending everything's fine just to avoid making waves. You need to see them for who they really are." My heart was pounding, and I could feel my hands trembling as I looked at him. I'm done being the one who always has to compromise. I'm done letting them treat me like this while acting like angels in front of you. You can do what you want, but I'm not staying quiet anymore. Dad looked at me, then back at them. He was quiet for a moment, probably trying to process everything. Finally, he said, "Why would they do something like that?" His tone wasn't dismissive, but it was clear he was struggling to believe this was intentional. Looked at him and said, "Because they always get away with it. Dad, every time I've tried to tell you what they're like, you brush it off. When Linda called me ungrateful last month for not doing the laundry on time, you told me to just let it go. When Brooke took my laptop without asking and broke the charger, you said I should have been clearer about my boundaries. You've been letting them treat me like this for years? Linda rolled her eyes. Oh, don't be so dramatic. We don't hate you. You're just making this all up because you want attention. That's when I remembered. The recording. Without another word, I pulled out my phone, opened the voice recorder app, and hit play. The kitchen filled with the sound of their voices, calling me a parasite, saying I didn't deserve the trip, and laughing about how easy it would be to ruin it. Dad's face turned pale as he listened. When the recording ended, there was a heavy silence. I cannot believe this, he finally said, his voice low and furious. You actually did this. Linda tried to backtrack. Richard, it's not what it sounds like. We were just venting. Everyone gets frustrated sometimes. It doesn't mean we actually did anything. Stop, Dad barked, cutting her off. Just stop. I've had enough of your excuses. He turned to Brooke, who looked like she was about to cry. And you? Did you really do this? Did you burn her passport? Brooke stammered. It was a joke. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. It's not like she can't just get a new one. A new one? Dad exploded. Do you have any idea how long it takes to get a replacement? She's supposed to leave in 2 days. Do you realize what you've done? Brooke started sobbing, but I wasn't buying it. She was only upset because she'd been caught. Linda tried to step in, saying, Richard, calm down. It's not like this can't be fixed. Calm down, Dad said, his voice trembling with anger. You've been treating my daughter like garbage behind my back, and now you've gone out of your way to ruin something that means the world to her. And you think I'm going to calm down? Linda opened her mouth to respond, but Dad held up his hand. I don't want to hear it. Both of you. Out. Now. Linda's jaw dropped. What are you talking about? Out? You're kicking us out over this? Yes, I am, Dad said firmly. I've ignored your behavior for far too long because I wanted to believe we could be a family. But this? This is unforgivable. Brooke stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. Dad, please, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. It's too late for apologies, Dad said. He turned and walked into his office, leaving the three of us standing there in stunned silence. A few seconds later, he came back with a folder in his hand. He opened it and pulled out a stack of papers, then shoved them at Brooke. You know what these are? Brooke looked down at the papers, confused. My student loan forms? Exactly, Dad said. I was going to co-sign these for you because I wanted to help you get through college. But now, forget it. He grabbed the papers out of her hands and tore them in half, letting the pieces fall to the floor. I stood there, stunned. I didn't know about the student loan thing. Brooke screamed, You can't do this. I need those loans. How am I supposed to go to college? That's not my problem anymore. Dad said coldly, If you want to sabotage my daughter's future, don't expect me to help with yours. Linda tried one last time to intervene. Richard, you're being unreasonable. You can't just throw us out like this. Yes, I can, Dad said. Get your things and get the hell out of my house. Dad spent most of his time in his office, dealing with lawyers and sorting through paperwork. One evening, I walked in to ask if he needed help, and I saw the divorce papers sitting on his desk. The sight of them made everything feel real in a way it hadn't before. This wasn't just a fight. This was the end of Linda and Brooke's place in our lives. Now that I've had time to sit with everything, I can't help but wonder, am I the problem here? I keep replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out if there's something I could have done differently. Linda and Brooke are gone, and Dad finally stood up for me, but the fallout has been exhausting. Brooke and Linda clearly hate me, and part of me feels guilty for how things ended, even though I know I didn't ask for any of this. Did I blow things out of proportion by telling Dad about their behavior? I don't know. What do you guys think? Was I wrong for standing my ground and not letting them get away with treating me like that? I could really use some outside perspective on this. Final update. Hey everyone, I wanted to give you all an update since a lot of you had questions, especially about the trip to Greece and how things have been since everything went down. I've also seen some people asking really thoughtful, logical questions about the story, so I'll do my best to address those too. Thanks for sticking with me, it's been a lot, but your comments and support have genuinely helped. About the Greece trip, for those of you asking. No, we didn't end up going to Greece. With everything that happened, the destroyed passport, the fallout with Linda and Brooke, and Dad dealing with the divorce, it just didn't feel like the right time. Honestly, as much as I'd been looking forward to it, I was okay with postponing. Greece was supposed to be this amazing experience to honor my mom, and after everything Linda and Brooke did, it felt like it had been tainted. Dad agreed that we'd wait until things settled down before rebooking the trip. That being said, Dad has been working on making it up to me. He's already helped me apply for an expedited passport and he's promised that we'll plan the trip again once all the divorce stuff is behind us. He even said we'd make it longer than the original plan, adding a couple of extra days to really explore. I can tell he feels bad that the trip got derailed, but honestly, I'm just grateful he stood up for me when it mattered. Also, a lot of you have asked why Dad didn't notice Linda and Brooke's behavior sooner. Trust me, I asked myself the same thing for years. The truth is, Linda and Brooke were really good at playing nice when he was around. They had this whole sweet stepmom and stepsister act that they turned on like a switch. They never made their snide comments or insults when Dad was in the room, so he didn't see that side of them until I started recording their conversations. And I didn't push harder to get Dad to intervene earlier. To be honest, I didn't want to cause more drama. Every time I hinted at their behavior, Dad would brush it off, saying things like, "They're just trying to adjust," or "Give it time." I think he wanted so badly for us to be a blended family that he ignored the red flags. It wasn't until the passport incident and the recording that he finally couldn't deny how toxic they were. So here's what's happened since my last post. A week after Linda showed up at the house unannounced, she escalated things. She started texting Dad, saying she'd fight for the house and the divorce. She hasn't paid a dime toward the mortgage or utilities since moving in. Everything was in Dad's name, but that didn't stop her from claiming she deserved half. Her texts ranged from manipulative, "Do you really want to break up this family?" to downright aggressive, "You'll regret this, Richard. I'll take everything from you." Dad finally had enough and involved his lawyer. They're now sorting through all the financial stuff, and it's clear Linda doesn't have a leg to stand on. She's panicking though, and it's painfully obvious. The last time she called, she screamed about how she was going to expose him for being a bad husband. Dad just hung up on her. He's been good about setting boundaries, but I can see the stress wearing on him. Brooke hasn't been much better. After I blocked her, she started messaging mutual friends and even distant relatives, trying to spin the narrative in her favor. She told people I destroyed her future because Dad refused to co-sign her student loans. One of my cousins actually texted me, asking if it was true that I forced Dad to kick them out. I had to explain the whole story to shut down the rumor mill. Brooke's tactics haven't worked as well as she hoped, though, because most of the family knows how Linda and Brooke treated me. One bright spot in all of this? Dad and I have started to rebuild our relationship. For a long time, I felt like he didn't really see me. Like he was so focused on making things work with Linda that he didn't notice how much I was struggling. But since the fallout, we've had some really good conversations. He's apologized more times than I can count, not just for the passport incident, but for everything he ignored over the years. He even said he regrets marrying Linda in the first place. Though I told him it's not about regret, it's about moving forward. I've had a lot of time to think about everything, and honestly, I still feel a mix of emotions. But one thing I've realized is how normalized their behavior had become. I used to think it was normal for me to pick up after everyone, or for Linda to criticize me for every little thing while Brooke could do no wrong. I thought it was my fault, like I wasn't good enough to meet their standards. But now that they're gone, I see it for what it was: control and favoritism. And I'm done letting anyone make me feel like I'm less than. That said, I know I'm not responsible for their actions. Linda and Brooke made their choices, and they're facing the consequences. I've learned the hard way that you can't force people to treat you with respect, especially if they're determined not to. For now, Dad and I are focusing on moving forward. He's finishing up the divorce paperwork, and we've started looking into therapy, both for him individually and for us as a family. I think we both have a lot to unpack after everything we've been through. And as for the Greece trip, it's still on the horizon. We're hoping to rebook it for next summer, and this time, nothing's going to stop us. Thanks again for all the comments and support. You've helped me feel a lot less alone in all of this. If you have more questions or advice, I'm all ears. And for anyone who's been in a similar situation, how did you deal with the guilt, even when you knew you weren't at fault? Let me know. I could use the insight.